Hey, y'all. While people are all concerned about investing in your retirement or investing in stocks, investing in real estate, these are all great things. One of the most powerful things you can do is invest in yourself. In fact, that's what successful people do. They know the power of investing in themselves. And it doesn't mean you got to spend millions of dollars on these big programs. Sometimes it's the simplest things that you can do. So this week, if you want to talk about investing in yourself, I invite and encourage you to join me today as together we unlock biblical wisdom for life with an episode titled Invest in Yourself. Howdy, Obi. I'm Willie Vaughn, author, speaker, and coach, and I want to thank you for joining me. You're listening to Packing Peanuts, your favorite 40 minutes of the week. This podcast is brought to you by Out of the Box Ministries, a biblically based personal development company that creates teaching and tools to help you succeed in life, both practically and spiritually, while getting to know Jesus more intimately. Each week, we bring you powerful principles and biblical insights to help you live the life God designed you to live and desires you to enjoy for your fulfillment and to make an impact on the world for good. That's Packing Peanuts because your soul is a treasure, so the life you pack it in matters. This week I'm talking about investing in yourself, and this episode actually came out of a conversation I've had. As I'm looking into marketing myself a little bit more, I've been starting to join these Facebook groups. And one of the business groups that I joined for Christians was the question came up. What would you go back and tell your younger self when you were starting out in the business? And my answer was this that came to me. I would encourage myself to start investing in the 3 E's. That is education, experience, and your environment a lot earlier on. You see, I've even counseled other people, and we all want to do the fun things. Whether you're on a farm, you want to go and buy the tractor. And I was amazing to think about it. Some people will spend $20,000 on a tractor or a piece of equipment. Not that that isn't necessary, but they won't spend $20 on investing in themselves to learn how to turn that tractor into a profitable machine. Or other people, they love designing the logo, even spending hours, days, weeks perfecting it before they've made a single sale. Recently, I talked to someone and I was coaching him, and he was like, yeah, I want to hold off on the coaching because I want to improve my website. And that really bothered me. I was like, that's great, and you should. You need a good, compelling, and converting website. But if you don't have the business mindset and the business acumen, the business intelligence ahead of that, what are you going to put in the website once you get it looking beautiful? And so I've realized that really, again, from my study, is that successful people know that they need to invest in themselves before they worry about the tools and the strategies and the systems. Those things are all important, but not at the expense of who you are, your skills, your mindset, your intelligence, and gaining those powerful things. So this week, we're going to talk about investing in ourselves in these 3 areas: in our environment, in our experience, and in our education, and what the Bible has to say about them. But before we get into that, let's have a little fun. I recently just quit my job to become an archaeologist, but now my life is in ruins. But let's get into the message for today. As I was thinking about these 3 E's, and again, it was coming back to the education, the experience, and the environment. As I began to ponder and meditate on the topic, as I like to say, ruminate on it, just kind of sleep on it, bring it back up, I realized not only are these 3 keys important to invest in, but I think it's really important the order in which you do it matters. And so I was thinking, a lot of times we put one before the other, but what it came to me was starting off with your environment. In Proverbs 13:20, it says, walk with the wise and become wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. Just a couple of weeks ago, we did a whole episode on your environment, talking about the parable of the talents and the soil in which you live and what the environment entails. But I really think it starts with that. You see, here's the reality. A lot of people talk about what normal is and what weird is. And normal is just what you're used to. Weird is something that's different. So anybody who's different than you, well, they're just weird. But I like to say it this way. Normal is defined by the box you put it in. Give it a better illustration. If you have a box of apples and you throw an orange into that box, that orange is weird. It's out of place. But if you have a box of oranges and you throw the apple in, that apple is weird and out of place because in a box of oranges, oranges are normal. In a box of apples, apples are normal. So what about you? Think about your environment. What is your normal? And how much is that defined by the box you find yourself in? And a lot of times when I was in church, I realized there was different classes of people, and I started to realize the difference. I loved about our church was that we had people who were successful and wealthy sitting right alongside people who were on assistance programs. And I felt, these people need to connect so they can get a better understanding of the reality of the world around us. Sometimes we get so caught up and think that everyone lives just like us, and that's just not true. In fact, a lot of people told me one of the best things they've ever done is to go on a missions trip, especially to like a third world country, and open their eyes to the reality of what the world is really like for other people. Because sometimes we get caught up in, what do we call it? Our first world problems, and we get to not being grateful, and we get to complain about all these things because we lack that perspective and that point of view, and we get out of the box of our own life. And so really having your environment is changing, and a way to invest in yourself is to look at how to invest in your environment. I've seen people who are in the system on welfare and assistance and WIC checks. Hey, I've been on unemployment. I've had food stamps for a season, and I get it. Sometimes there's a need there. But I've also seen people who get stuck in that, and they surround themselves, and everybody around them is going through the same thing. And even if they tried to pull out of it, people would say, why do you want to do that? Why are you working so hard? Because normal has become that set of circumstances. And this is just how we live. What's the big deal? This is normal. Why try to be any different? And so normal really impacts who you are. It's your environment. And if you want to improve your life, get outside of your normal. Change the environment. I've heard of people who even, they had nothing, but they made it a point. Go to the wealthy side of town. They would go and maybe just set up their laptop at a bar or a deli and be constantly surrounded by people who were wealthy, who were affluent, who had more to offer. It started to raise their level of expectation of what was possible in life. It also started to bring around conversations of things of higher quality and different topics. They overheard people talking about investing, or overheard people talking about how they made $1 million doing this or $100,000 doing that. I heard a story once of a guy who said he was, spending some time with some people he just met in Texas, and they were talking about how they bought a couple thousand head of cattle at $5,000 a head, and they were selling them for $10,000. Obviously not $5,000 a head, but they were selling them for thousands of dollars, and the numbers were so astronomical. And he said afterwards to his wife, did you hear how they were just using those numbers as if it was normal, as if it wasn't any big deal? And it's like, maybe it is possible, even in the cattle industry, to do these things to grow because somebody's actually doing it. When you start to overhear those conversations, when you start to talk with people like that, you'll realize maybe the way I've been living, maybe the way I've been doing things, maybe the way I've been thinking isn't all there is, isn't all that is possible for even me. Walk with the wise and become wise. Get outside of your comfort zone. Invest in a better environment. For a lot of people, that means maybe going to conferences. If you want to improve your business or start a business, go to some business conferences. Get around people who are already running their own businesses. Maybe you want to take your business from $100,000 a year to $500,000 a year. Get around people who have grown their business from $100,000 to $500,000, who know how to make the changes as they've gone through. Get that environment. Maybe there's people ahead of you, mentors or coaches who can tell you about the pitfalls of when you make changes and kind of give you a heads up and help you grow in that area or arena. And so do that. Make sure you're investing in your environment. And I really think putting that first is key because environment has a lot to do with our mindset. And I'm big on mindset. I love talking about it since I've realized the power of it. Since I realized that the Bible, what we call faith, really is a mindset. When you make a decision to put your faith in Jesus, you have to set your mind on certain things. You have to set your mind on the Bible. You have to set your mind on the power of Scripture and how it is inerrant. You have to set your mind on what is the kingdom of God like, what does He expect, and what does He promise. And so faith is a mindset. But when you change your environment, you will change your mindset, and that will be a leading thing. Because if you try to change other things before you change your convictions, before you change what you think, before you change what's in your heart, nothing will stick as well. You really need to change your environment, change your soul, and then the other things you do will add to it. Once you change that environment, once you invest in that environment, and you raise your mindset, I think the next best thing to invest in is experience. Now, I love this when in 1 Timothy 6:17, it says, teach those who are wealthy in this present age not to put their trust in wealth, which is fleeting, but to put their hope, their trust in God, who gives us all things for our enjoyment. Now, here's what I'm learning and growing in, is basically saying life is to be experienced. God gives us life for our enjoyment. And one of the best things that you can do to gain experience is to try. Listen, try and be willing to fail. Some of the biggest lessons you will learn in life are from your failures big if you're willing to look at them and learn from them. A lot of times if our mindset isn't right and we try and we fail, we don't learn the lessons because we don't analyze and say, okay, what happened? What went wrong? What can I do differently? And how could I have come up with a different outcome? In fact, I was actually watching F1, I think was the movie, the Formula One race. And at one point, one of the main characters says he's going to go in and do the simulator of where he crashed. And he tried it over and over and over again, different ways to figure out how would it have actually turned out differently. He just didn't mope around and say, oh, it stinks that I got into a car wreck. It stinks that I got into a car accident. He was willing to go at it again and again until he learned the lesson. This is what I should have done differently. See, having that mindset gives you the ability to grow, and that comes from experience. And I specifically realized that putting experience before education is paramount. It is key. It is so important. A lot of times we want to invest in education, and that's right. But I've been in situations myself. I was at a job one time, and the boss says, you know what, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask. There's never a stupid question. But here's the thing. Until I made some mistakes, I didn't know what questions to ask. He came and asked me one time when something went wrong, how come you didn't ask? And I'm like, well, the reality is I thought I knew it. Actually, I knew it. I just knew wrong. And until I made that mistake, I didn't know what questions to ask. Sometimes you need to go and gain experience. You need to try different things. You need to fall and learn. I'm in a group talking about podcasting. And a part of it is just trying to do a podcast and then saying, okay, that was hard. How do I do this differently? How do I do that differently? Otherwise, you can go in and say, I know absolutely nothing. Please tell me everything. And you can't get the right kind of advice or wisdom. So gaining that experience first. Try different things. Sometimes it's about trying different things to realize what you like and what you don't. I remember when I first started attending church and I wanted to get involved and volunteer, I tried my hand at everything. And I learned some things that I didn't like or enjoy doing this. I learned what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. The old joke is I realized I'm not good at dealing with little kids. When I was teaching the Sunday school class of 4-year-olds, and every week Benjamin came in and said, this is boring. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. But I gained that knowledge through experience. So try different things. Experience life. Be willing to fail. Be willing to fall. Be willing to grow. You will learn so much if you're willing to invest in experiences. Maybe sometimes it's not even about going to the biggest college, but but spending time to travel abroad. I was listening to someone else, another podcast, and they said they took their kids and did some travel school where they traveled around the world to experience different cultures, to learn different skills hands-on. They learned different languages. They learned how to overcome different challenges, how to communicate. And there's so many valuable things that you can learn that don't come with a degree, but come with experience. In fact, you'll think about sometimes whether you want to be a good salesperson or you want to market yourself, gaining experience is more valuable than sitting and reading a book. And then once you've gained the experience, then I believe it is so powerful to engage in and invest in your education. Now, of course, we live in a day and age where education is this kind of trendy topic, and I have my own opinions about it. Now, I think we're getting to the place to realize that going to college just for the sake of going to college isn't the best course of action anymore. Hey, if you're going to be a doctor, and if you're going to be a lawyer or one of those jobs, you need to go to college. In fact, if you're going to be a brain surgeon, don't just read a couple books. I don't want you cutting me open and operating on me just because you think you can do it or you're looking for experience. There are times when getting a college education and spending the time and the years is so valuable. But there are other ways in which to get an education. One, you can simply go to your local library. Yeah, we still have those. And on the shelves, you know what they have? Books. And you can check them out for free. Who knew? And you can read them and learn that way. You can get what I've heard some people call a library card degree or a local library degree. You can go to YouTube University and you can type in, and it's a search engine, and you can ask all different questions and get different people to teach you about a certain topic and how to go through things. You can get the kind of education where maybe it's an internship where you learn as you work, free or paid. A lot of times, companies will actually pay you to learn. My son was looking at becoming a mechanic, and he said he wasn't going to go to college. Instead, he was going to just go right into the workforce because most of the places that were hiring said, we will pay for education. We will pay to get you the specific training that you need. So it's not about just investing and saying, I'm going to get a degree to put on the wall, but it's saying, what specific things do I need to learn? We have masterminds and master classes. I believe that's one of the new programs out there. You can join for a yearly subscription and learn from experts on all the different types of topics, whether it's, sales, marketing, speaking, whatever it is you need. And here's the thing I've realized, that really the best time to invest in your education is when you can find something you're passionate about. If you're 18 years old and you don't really know what you want to do and you don't have an ambition, going to school and dragging yourself to a class may not be the best thing. Maybe you wait a year or two and find out what you're really into, what you're really passionate about. Because if you find something that you're interested in and you're passionate about, when you go to study it, when you go to learn, you will really get something from it. And it really is important to learn. 2 Timothy 2:15 or 1 Timothy 2:15, one of them, says, be diligent to study, or study to show yourself approved, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, but accurately handles the word of truth. And again, I love that because it's talking about study, and there's all different ways to study, whether through experience, through trial and error, through scientific study, or through reading. But don't just study to learn, to have a bunch of useless information. I hope you're not studying just so you can get on Jeopardy. I hope you're not studying just for trivia. Study to show yourself approved, that you don't need to be ashamed because you're a workman. You are able to do the work that you've been called to do, the work that God has assigned you to do in this life. You can create value through what you've studied. For me, the past several years has been studying personal development, has been studying and comparing how it applies to the Bible, has been studying growing businesses and starting businesses and entrepreneurship. And now I've gained the wisdom and the knowledge to help other people who are wanting to do those same things, who are wanting to grow as a person. To help you, I study so that I have something to offer you, not just so I can be a great conversationalist list at a dinner party. So study to show yourself approved. Study to be a workman. Study because you're looking to have something to offer and you want to use your skills, your talents, and your passions to make the world a better place. If you invest in yourself in that way, you will excel, you will succeed, you will be able to add more value. Not only that, you will also be able to add more value in the areas that you enjoy. Because I truly believe you are put here for a reason. Now, one of the reasons in which you are put here is to serve others. And when you do that well, profit becomes a byproduct. Don't go out there working for money. That's not a good enough reason to work. Go out there to serve other people. Go out there to be fruitful and multiply, like is all our calling, as it says in Genesis. Go out there to serve others. And if you do so correctly, if you do so in a way that adds value, you will bring about profitability. And if you have the mindset to do it right, you'll realize you're adding value to other people, not for free, but with a willingness to be compensated. In the Proverbs, it says, people bless those who are willing to sell grain. So learn all you can. Invest in yourself, in your education, and your skills, and then be willing to be compensated for it. Put it out there as a marketable service to others, creating value. This is the way in which you can invest in yourself in order to get the most out of it and make the world a better place. So invest in your environment. Invest in your experiences and invest in your education. Because if you invest in your environment, you gain the right mindset. If you invest in your experience, you gain skill. And when you invest in your education, you gain wisdom. And when those three come together, nothing can stop you. Well, friend, I hope that this message has challenged, inspired, encouraged, and equipped you to invest in yourself to be all that you were created to be. Until next time, remember, Jesus loves you, and so do I.